Okay.
All right.
So, greetings, everyone. On behalf of Campbell Lovett and myself, Kwame Osei-Reed, co-chairs of the UCC Peace and Engagement Committee, I welcome you to this Just Peace webinar. And I ask now that our hearts and minds be joined in prayer. Good God, we thank you that you call us to serve. You call us to the cause of justice and peace, the fulfillment of your word. And we thank you for those who respond and those who will respond. We thank you for the churches that have made the commitment to be just peace congregations. And for this occasion, this time to share and know the story of a particular church, its journey toward being a just peace church. We thank you for that church and all of our churches. And those of us who have gathered tonight, be with us. We place ourselves in your hands, trusting in you and for your guidance. And this time, and as we go forward. Through Christ Jesus we pray. Amen. I now turn to Campbell, who will give the background for our committee and will guide us through the agenda. Campbell.
Thanks, friend. And welcome to all the other friends who have joined us as well. The Membership and Engagement Committee of the Just Peace Steering Committee from time to time has held these Zoom conversations, presentations, and they are very important so that we don't feel isolated in our congregations and that there are opportunities for us to be together virtually to encourage one another and to share resources with each other. So thank you all for joining this evening. Our time together will be fairly simple. We'll have this quick background of this committee. Then I will introduce our friends from Friedens Church, which basically means Friends UCC. We get a lot of friends tonight. We'll have some time for Q&A with the leadership team that led the Just Peace process at that church. And then we're going to use a pivot question to open up what some of our churches are doing. This has been a very challenging few months with the war in Ukraine, the terrible gun violence, which is just our undoing, and sharing together what some of our congregations are doing in response. So there will be a time for us to share some of what we're doing. And then Mike Neuroth from our Washington, D.C. office will share some resources that will be helpful during this time. And Pastor Sheila Guillaume, our fearless leader as the Just Peace Steering Committee chair, will give us some updates as well. So that's the simple format. This time together is a time that follows some of the other Zoom offerings we've had. A few months ago, the other committee of the Just Peace Steering Committee, the Education and Advocacy Committee, hosted Don't Shoot Martin Luther King and Gun Violence Then and Now, which there is a recording of that, and it should be listed on our Just Peace website. Mike will hopefully list the Just Peace website link so folks can see that and see the many resources that are there. There was a webinar on armed drones, a webinar on the US military and environmental justice, and an excellent symposium on Afghanistan. In all of these efforts, what we found is by gathering Just Peace folk together for conversation, for encouragement, and for looking at a variety of resources. We help build the Just Peace movement in the United Church of Christ that we've been doing since 1985. So without further ado, I want to introduce our friends from Friedens UCC in Indianapolis, Indiana. On December 12th of 2021, they became a Just Peace church. They had assigned one of their members, Adam Hayden, to be the lead of a Just Peace exploratory team. And that exploratory team began in August of 2020 and went through a process that Adam will share with us. And so I'd like to turn things over to Adam Hayden to introduce himself and his team and help us hear the good ways that that church is being Just Peace.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Campbell. How wonderful to be with you this evening, friends. I am Adam Hayden from Indianapolis, Indiana, member of Friedens UCC. I am joined this evening, and give us a wave, Lindsay Eichelman, a dear friend of mine, also a member of Friedens, and was a member of the exploratory team that helped us achieve Just Peace status, and another dear friend, Ellen Weimer. Ellen, give us a wave. So Ellen's role, she is a ministry team leader at Friedens, and she's on a kind of a moving outward ministry team, a team that is focused on getting beyond the four walls of Friedens UCC. After we passed the Just Peace Covenant, joining also with our ONA Covenant, our Global Missions Covenant, the Friedens Moving Outward team kind of has oversight over each of those covenants to think about how we create opportunities for our members to stretch into the communities and act in a way that is in accord with those covenants. I'm going to share a little bit about the process with you this evening. I'm going to invite Lindsay to talk a little bit about her experience as a member of that exploratory team, and in fact, a lifelong member of Friedens UCC. And then Ellen is going to join us as we get to that pivot question, because Ellen is really overseeing Just Peace in action at Friedens. Ellen's going to talk a little bit about our response as a congregation to the crises of the day. So let me just begin with our process. I know that we're all moving towards Just Peace using many shared resources, but I do think it's helpful to highlight sort of the process. How did this all get going? So we did approach, Campbell did such a nice job of setting this up for us. We did approach our council on ministries around that. I think it was July that we began to have conversations. There were some of us we have an equipping ministry team, and then CE or Christian Ed, which is a lifelong spiritual formation in the language of Friedens. Through conversations internally with myself, the ministry team leaders for the equipping and a lifelong spiritual formation team, we felt as though it was time for Friedens to covenant in a new and a different way, but really drawing from our deep roots at Friedens. We are one of these UCC churches with a deep history. We are a German church. We have a great German immigrant heritage, folks who really have a care for creation, kind of at the heart of what brought them to Indianapolis. That is a tradition that has thrived throughout Friedens. Friedens itself, a German word for peace. So peace has been at the heart of our ministries. The ONA covenants came first through Friedens, and we thought, well, what is a new way to express our covenant? How do we covenant together and with the Holy One? Through those internal conversations, we felt that Just Peace was a good step for our congregation that not only would challenge us in new ways, but would draw on the rich heritage that was already present at Friedens. That's some of what Lindsay will share with you just in a moment. So we approached our council in July with a proposal. The proposal was to establish an exploratory team, a team to discern whether Just Peace was a good match for Friedens. And in fact, that was the first objective of our proposal, is let's discern together, let's decide, ought we, is the Spirit calling us to pursue a Just Peace designation? The second objective if we felt like the Spirit so moved us, if she was working in our midst in that way, the second objective then was to make recommendations to our Council on Ministries. Here are the steps to pursue the Just Peace designation. What are those steps? Well, you all know them, friends. They are the steps that are in the UCC Just Peace Handbook. So this really shaped our discernment time together. We made a call to the congregation. There were 14 members of Friedens that responded to the call to join the exploratory team. I'll pause here to emphasize that the team that responded to that call is an intergenerational group. And I hope he doesn't mind me saying though, but John Gant is just one of my best friends in the whole world, but represent a different part of the intergenerational matrix than that I may represent. So it's important that we had an intergenerational group. We had a group made up of both lay and clergy members, and we had folks that identified with different orientations, folks who embraced our O&A covenant in different ways. Our O&A covenant is to create an inclusive space for the LGBTQ community, but again, is more expansive to also call out that regardless of other identifiers, political orientation, things like this, that we recognize being one in discipleship as the community of Friedens UCC. So a 14-member team of intergenerational folks, lifelong Friedens members, and some folks that have not been around just as long, began meeting monthly. I call out the first objective there of discerning whether Just Peace made sense for us, because we, friends, indeed began each meeting with that first objective in mind. That through our careful discernment, if we decided that Just Peace was not the correct option for Friedens, was not the right time to move in that direction, we didn't want to simply pursue something because we said that we would. So I want to lift that up, because I think sometimes in our councils and committees and ministry teams, listen, I'm a lifelong church person. My dad's a pastor, so I'm a PK. Sometimes we make committees, we get people on committees, and we just show up every month because we're supposed to. Did anybody brew the coffee? Who brought the donuts? So we wanted to be really thoughtful about this, that should we even pursue this? So that was our first objective. We would report back to the Council on Ministries, whether our 14-member intergenerational team, through biblical examination, through prayer together, through conversations, examining resources like the UCC Just Peace Handbook, and reaching into the UCC Just Peace Facebook group. Thank you, Michael, for the good work there, to identify other churches who are on this journey, to bring in the covenants of churches that have already shared a designation. So we studied that as a group, and the group decided unanimously, which may be no surprise, the folks who were called to the ministry may then agree to pursue the ministry. But we did decide that first objective, that we wanted to pursue the designation. So we informed the council of that, which then set in motion programming and organization opportunities for the entire congregation. So these look like the traditional book studies and multimedia studies, but we also engage opportunities like breath and movement. We have an associate pastor who is really a terrific yoga instructor, and her gift is great relationships deep into our community. So some of the partners that we have in the community who we support through benevolences, we also invited these folks to be involved in some of our yoga opportunities. We have a community garden that is a partnership with other churches nearby, Presbyterian folks, Catholic folks, so nice ecumenicism happening around the community garden. So we try to really be in the campus, in creation, with community partners. These are the things that we strive for through some of that programming across the congregation. We decided through those efforts, yes, we want to pursue this. We went to the council and we said, here are the 15 steps in the handbook. Here's what we've accomplished along the way. And we have decided, here are the steps to bring this to the congregation. The way that our constitution and bylaws are organized at Friedens UCC requires the council to be the kind of ultimate governance around presenting votes to the congregational body. So we really handed over the reins of the group to the council to say, these are our recommendations, but we are letting go of these in order to engage our governance structure. Now, I think that was really important because for us, of course, the folks called to the team who had been involved in the process, yes, we are on board. We think we should do this. But getting that alignment with our greater Council on Ministries at Friedens was really instrumental in then introducing that work to the congregation, organizing a congregational meeting, organizing a vote to that end. So I think that shared accountability model is important to lift up. Maybe I'm telling you things that you already know, but I think it is important that we engage all levels of leadership and governance, making sure we're acting in accord with the Constitution and bylaws, because I think it tends to work against us when we only have small pockets of ministry. Friedens is a group with lifelong members, folks who remember that the building that we're in now was built in 1964. We have folks who remember carrying boxes of things from the old campus to the new campus. So we wanted to respect those deep roots and relationships within the community. And so our Council on Ministries represents members who do share that heritage at Friedens UCC. So we had a couple of congregational wide forums. One was facilitated virtually via Zoom. Another was in person. Of course, we were navigating COVID throughout the time. It was interesting that our Just Peace group worked almost exclusively via Zoom. Now, some folks like my friend Lindsay and Ellen, we have a relationship prior to the work, but some of us really forged relationships virtually as we did this work navigating the sort of COVID environment. But luckily, we were at a place where it was safe within our county to have an in-person forum. So indeed we did. And then we organized a congregational vote and we passed by broad margin our Just Peace covenant to declare ourselves a Just Peace congregation. So from a process standpoint, I'm not sure if anything about that was new to you, but that is the process that we followed. And of course, we'll have time to talk about that more in Q&A. But before and I haven't been looking at a clock, so somebody stop me, but I was given 15 minutes for process. I want to make sure that my friend Lindsay has an opportunity. She was a member of that Just Peace exploratory team, and Lindsay's going to offer a few words about how it connects with her church experience. Lindsay, thanks.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So pleased and happy to be in the presence of such a wonderful group of believers. So for me, the way of Jesus is obviously the life of justice and peace. I think as in the company of fellow believers, I think we can all agree that Jesus's way is the just peace way. My grandfather, as Adam mentioned, our church is deeply rooted in a German background, but my grandfather actually immigrated from Germany through a sponsor in our church congregation. So for me, our roots have always been in this just peace work, whether that's with a group of immigrants who built the church, who were dedicated to sharing the love of Christ, or it's through the work that we have done forever in hunger and other marginalized communities that experience hunger. Our work has always been this work. The tagline of whoever or wherever you are on life's journey, there's a place for you here, has really always rang true for me at my home at Friedens, but I also recognize that I grew up in this congregation with family and folks who were part of my, was kind of a joke when I was a kid that, everybody at Friedens was related to you in some way because all of us had immigrated from this small town in Germany. But it's always been a home to me that has offered the extravagant welcome. I also recognize that if we want to continue to do that good work of Jesus, then we have to get uncomfortable with our comfortable places and really push the outlines to ensure that we're continuing to offer that extravagant welcome, that we're offering true sisterly and brotherly support to marginalized communities, and that we're seeking equity and justice for those who are oppressed. So to me, we're really good at being here together and offering that to the folks who walk through our doors, but how can we really push the boundaries to see if this is a good fit for our congregation to continue to offer that extravagant welcome out into the community. So it was important to me to participate. Like Adam said, this was all during COVID. We were all stuck at home. This was a really great opportunity for me in the time that the world was kind of on fire in a lot of ways. What started for me as simple participation in some book studies surrounding racism that complemented my personal and professional work grew to the opportunity to be a part of this exploratory team. I thought it was important for me as a lifelong member to be a part of that discernment process and to offer my kind of viewpoint from a lifelong membership. And as a younger, I even hate to say this anymore because I don't feel like it as much anymore, but as a younger member of the congregation, to offer that unique lens to this group. So said yes to sitting on this exploratory committee. To me, this whole covenant was a no-brainer. I couldn't understand why we wouldn't want to embrace a just peace covenant. But this was a really great opportunity for me as a congregant to learn from fellow congregants, to get really uncomfortable with lots of different things. And overall, I'm just so proud of the deep work that this group did across generations, across different groups in Friedens, to really examine, build and examine the covenant, and to vet it through the membership, and to do the education and the work to make sure that this was a good fit for us. And I think ultimately just so proud of the congregation for that commitment and that covenant, that promise. It was really important to me that this was a promise, that we would not just say that we're a just church, but this will continue because of the covenant to be a lens that we evaluate our work through as we move forward and outward into the community, and see what this next generation of believers and churchgoers looks like, because we know it's going to look a lot different than what our past has looked like. So I'm just really honored to have been a part of this group. I'm really proud of our church congregation for adopting the covenant, and really grateful to be here with you all, to learn from you all, and to share what our church has done. So thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. That's great. You know, from the small town in Germany here to the south side of Indianapolis, Indiana. You know, I think that our covenant, it's interesting that I just read this book that maybe you've read too, Cathedral on Fire, discussing kind of the climate crisis in the moment. There's a term introduced there, well, two of them, that just spoke to me so clearly. And in fact, our church is gonna, well, I don't want to give it away, but gonna begin a study with this. Our associate minister has a really terrific kind of young adult ministry, the Caring Conscious Community. She's done terrific work around introducing and bringing in facilitators of color to ensure that, you know, leadership doesn't look like me, because it looks like me in a lot of our churches. But Sarah, Pastor Sarah, Sarah Haas, if you know Sarah, she's going to lead a study with that group, with Cathedral on Fire. She let me borrow that book to get my thoughts on it. Two phrases come out of that resonate with me. One is referring to God as the big gardener, I think is terrific. And the other is, we've talked about creation care, the idea of creation justice. And so I think our covenant is really modeled around the intersection of racial justice, of climate justice, of justice in terms of a response that peace is possible. How do we respond nonviolently? So I think that there's a tremendous amount of intersectionality that showed up in our covenant. I think we were really motivated to begin the Just Peace Exploratory Team, both in the ways that we've shared with you, but this was also during the time following George Floyd's murder. And it felt to us as though, as we pursue a just peace, as we declare that peace is possible, we couldn't do that in a truly authentic and genuine way without also realizing the intersectionality of racial justice and these concerns. So I'm proud of our covenant because it does stretch beyond peace and nonviolence, and names exclusively dismantling systems that undermine the dignity of creation, such as heterosexism, homophobia, dismantling systems of injustice, dismantling systems of racial injustice. So I'm so proud of our covenant. And it was, again, here's the one more thing I love about it. And then I know I've probably reached, oh, good, I've got 4 minutes left in the agenda time. But I'm so proud. One more process note is that really, I just sort of made the agendas and made sure we showed up on time and facilitated a discussion. But in terms of what the events actually were, how we actually drafted the covenant, we had little subgroups within the team working together. And I think that was really important because as leaders, we see the world through the biases that we carry with us. We did a lot of work around recognizing our implicit biases, and I think ensuring that we had small pockets of subgroups that broke off to do different components of the work was just one of the ways that we tried to make sure we had a diversity of input in the document that we ultimately prepared. So I think I'll close that on process. I want to make sure as we get to the kind of looking at what church is doing today, that Ellen is going to share some of that great work when it's time for that. So I look to our meeting facilitators to make sure that we hit on that in a little bit. But I think that's what I've prepared for the process bit for this evening. So I suppose, Campbell, maybe back to you at this point.
Hey, thanks, Adam. What I find so compelling about your and Lindsay's presentation is a lot of our churches go through ebbs and flows of just peace engagement and involvement. And it's so great to hear your enthusiasm and commitment. And I think that all of our churches, we need a healthy dose of that enthusiasm and encouragement as we continue to do this work. We have a few minutes. If people have any questions for Adam or Lindsay, knowing that we have a pivot question for them that another member of their team will share. But I think in the more section of your taskbar, you can raise your hand or you can unmute and jump in if you have a question for Adam or Lindsay.
Under reactions, you can raise your hand or you can raise your actual hand like Joyce is doing.
Joyce is in.
A question about the time frame. I know you said you started in July, and I think I heard that you voted in December or January. At what point, how long did you spend preparing the covenant before it was introduced to the congregation, I gather, in 2 forums or followed by 2 forums? It's sort of the time frame for all that, I'm wondering.
Yeah. So let me begin. Let me go a little bit broad, and then we'll sort of narrow in a little bit on that. We established an O&A task force to work towards our O&A covenant. And now these opportunities for discernment, we want to allow the Spirit to move in our midst. So rushing things is not ideal. And I'll share that, the O&A task force met for, it might have been 4 years before we got there. Now, I think within the setting, of our congregation that is within Middle America, that is a predominantly white congregation, that is a predominantly at the center of some of our power structures, that those conversations and opportunities for discernment and learning together and feeling to be in a safe place and moving forward together, we have leveraged our relationships. I think that task force stretched, it was a long time that O&A task force met. And so it was, as the person that was leading the exploratory team, I wanted to make sure that we didn't merely kick the can down the road. I wanted us to be sure that we took time for discernment, but then when it was time to make the next step, that we were prepared to do that. In our very beginning conversations as a task force, I put forth 2 different models. And I said, here's what this may look like if we were to target a 12-month process for this. And here's what this would look like if we were to look something like 18 months. 18 months was the upper limit that I had given us room to work with. I think it was important because we had authorization from the council. We had a 14-member team. It was clear to me that it was the time to take the next step. So we kind of went after this 18-month roadmap as sort of what we looked at. And then we slotted that in with what was happening in the liturgical calendar, what was happening in the local community calendar, so that it wasn't just an arbitrary 18 months, but 18 months that we also tried to sort of marry up with other things that were happening. Following this kind of governance model, gosh, I use these words, sometimes I feel like it's just the reality, right, of how we get business done. But I also feel like sometimes I'm taking myself too seriously. But we reviewed the covenant internally first. So I mentioned that there was a small group that presented a covenant to the team. Our 14-member exploratory team then provided our edits to that document. Once we were feeling like we had a good version to present, we then took that to the Council on Ministries. So the Council on Ministries had an opportunity to provide feedback. It was ultimately with their approval that we then moved to the congregation. So we wanted to ensure that all the leadership of the congregation had an opportunity to weigh in on the document before it reached the congregation. We felt like that was the right step. So there were multiple sort of checkpoints with different groups. And it's interesting, I think Michael might have dropped in the link to our website where we had the Just Peace page. I don't recall specifically when we first, I think it was was it February of 21 that the council then gave the okay? Does that feel right? I see Lindsay's giving me a nod. So I think from the time in July of 2020, then through February of 21 is when the initial draft went to the council. The council spent a little bit of time with that. And then we began during Sunday morning worship. We had folks come and offer reflection in service. And we provided the covenant both in print in the bulletin and then also online on that Just Peace page. That's another nice process step, I think, as we did establish that Just Peace page on the website. Our tech person taught me just enough to be dangerous there. But we wanted to be sure that we were beginning to organize, right? Here's what it looks like in the church, so that as the required steps in the Just Peace handbook say, does your constitution, does the mission of your church, does it reflect your work in the Just Peace arena? So we wanted to begin with some of that sort of congregation-facing communication really as early as we could. So I guess we came together we were authorized in July, went to February 21, that we got the covenant in front of the congregation. And then it was a few months after that that we began to discuss that within the greater congregational body. But I should mention, as a 14-member task force, we were in front of people frequently, and sometimes not even by design. Sometimes it was just like, hey, we go to church regularly, or we're on virtual worship regularly. And so, oh yeah, we're beginning to identify these 14 folks with this Just Peace process. So I think even before documents showed up, it was the idea of like, here's who we are. We're you, you're us. We reflect the Friedens Church body. So Joyce, I don't know if that was a long-winded response, but I am a pastor's kid, so I can't help it.
Great. Any other questions for the team before we pivot? And I can't see if other folks are on the other screen raising hands, but I'm not seeing any indication. So I wanted to move us into this pivot question that Adam has said another team member will share. But one of the things that we're finding with Just Peace churches is Just Peace becomes a lens through which they look at issues of justice. Part of the urgency of tonight's gathering is because, unfortunately, we've got a whole new litany of names that are in our consciousness and in our hearts and our prayers and really in the pit of our stomachs. But Ukraine, Buffalo, Uvalde, Tulsa, we add to the hundreds of other names of gun violence, of war, of white supremacist violence. Very troubling. And so the pivot question that Friedens will answer, and then we'll move into open conversation. But how has Friedens responded to any number of these current crises? And how does being a Just Peace church shape your response? And Adam, you can let us know who's going to field that question.
Yes, Ellen. who needs no
And
introduction.
I will jump in just enough to say what a joy it is to be with the young'uns in our church as we have worked on some of this together. I will add that the process was very meaningful, book studies, inviting the congregation to be a part of that, and getting to know one another better was another part of that process that I think brought us to the point of then rejoicing in the approval of the congregation to bring us into it. And I will give just a very brief little backup to where we are coming into this, because you're asking, to begin with that specific, here we are at such a consequential time in our community life, certainly in our faith life, in response to that, all that is around us. I'll point out that we are actually functioning from a newly formed ministry team. Our church council, and I will do a quick shout out that our president, our young president of our church council, and other members of that organization, of that part of our governance, are here. There are a number of people here who were a part of the Just Peace Exploratory team, another number of people who are a part of the Friedens Moving Outward Ministry team, which basically is traditional outreach on steroids, with our covenants being an important part of what we are charged to take care of, to implement, to work with. So I put that out because we're actually defining our roles as a ministry team, and certainly Just Peace has had a great impact on how we approach that as we reestablish this particular team, having moved our entire church structure of the council from 11 ministries to 7, and to be working very much across ministry teams, not in silos, but working across with one another. So in response to 2 specific things, first, I will say we also realigned our benevolent giving in line with our Friedens Moving Outward focus on ministry to children and youth. And in looking at justice from that particular lens of our overarching focus, but coming back again to our covenants, helping us, guiding us, being a lens through which we could work. So circling back again to the pivotal mention of when the Russian aggression began on Ukraine, new to me, and I'm a 20-year member of the congregation, so I am truly a newbie when you put it in the context of a 110-year-old congregation, but several people here from Friedens are also, we are a part of that generation that is both based on family history, but also on being drawn into a congregation over a period of time where we find a focus on justice and a focus on peace and a focus on living our faith in the way of Jesus. And so when the aggression began, we looked around as a newly formed ministry team and said, we have to respond. And in a way that was new to us, we formed within a week an opportunity for the congregation to have a prayers for Ukraine, for peace for Ukraine, an outreach through social media, an outreach and the opportunity to gather to pray and to dwell on the significance of this happening in the world. When we speak of action, primarily at that early point in this year of a newly formed team leading about 20 people working together in various ways, that forming that opportunity to pray in addition to in worship, to gather in a kind of vigil, was significant in shaping us And it also evolved into of course, the outreach into what action do we take, primarily a financial one of individual involvement. With Uvalde, the same thing was happening quickly. We must pray, but then what do we do? And so we began individually, not collectively, jumping in on contacting legislators, being active in that manner. So I think that kind of focuses in on your first, on the pivot question. In terms of just a brief other context, we had just approved our ONA covenant before the beginning of the pandemic. And so again, as kind of stretching our muscles, kind of learning how to be beyond our walls in new ways that are not quite so introspective, but looking outward and connecting. I think that is informed by the way we were quickly able this year, as we celebrate for the first time, and not virtually, but in person, an anniversary and rededication of that covenant. We have jumped into participating in a Pride Festival, in Indy Pride Parade, to take action, because I think that's something that within our congregation, my personal opinion is that we need to flex our muscles and build our experience. We have long been advocates with Bread for the World. We're looking at huge impact in our country and around the world, starting back with Ukraine and the everything that we're facing there, the food insecurity. Through Bread for the World, we have some muscle memory already of having written letters and reached out to our legislators. And we certainly exercise that together this year with renewed force. We also have in place already plans beginning for our September 18th celebration of becoming a Just Peace congregation and reaching out there. So, without going too much further, other than to say reaching out and action is what we're trying to learn more about. Youth book study was on This Book is Anti-Racist, and that was pretty cool for youth. Adam's Linton study, extending it as an asynchronous digital study, took us and connected across the community and conference to offer some things there. And one final thing I'll just mention is we, in refocusing benevolences, have looked within agencies that address LGBTQ youth. We've also have a new commitment to infant maternal health as another justice area. So that's just a little more context of these are some things that are new to us or revamped for us because we're trying to look through the lens of being a Just Peace congregation. So coming back to the issues of the day, for us right now, it's still, pray, but now what are our actions? What more do we do? How do we evolve?
Ellen, thank you very much. I love the image of muscle memory and just peace. How do we make just peace, our muscle memory? And it's the first thing we go to is working with that lens. So thank you all for sharing that. My co-chair, Kwame Osei-Reed, is going to help all of us engage in that pivot question at this point. So back to you, Kwame.
Thank you, Campbell, and certainly thank you, our friends from Friedens, very much. And Mike Newroth is going to help us have small group discussions. But Ellen has certainly modeled the next question for me, at least, and I think for us. And the question is, how has your church responded to current crises? And we do have crises. And if your church is a Just Peace church, how has that identity helped shape your response? So Ellen, thank you for giving us an example of how we might have that discussion. And so I'm going to turn now to Mike to be able to put us in groups, to talk about those questions and to bring us back to the larger group after.
All right. Thanks, Kwame. So I'm going to put us into 5 different groups of about 6 people, 6 or 7 people, knowing that not everyone may participate actively. Some are in listen-only mode, but that gives us in each group a critical mass of folks. So if you would introduce yourself and then answer those questions, we'll be in the groups for probably about 15 minutes or so. So a little bit of a chance to get to know each other and talk about how we're all responding in these challenging times. So it'll most likely suck you into these breakout rooms. And if you have any issues, I'll stay here in the main room to help you all with tech support. But I'll go ahead and click break up into breakout rooms now. Welcome back, everyone. Kwame and Kim, I don't know if we want to take a couple minutes to see if there's things that people wanted to lift up out of their breakout rooms.
So, yeah, and we invite you to do that, things you would like to lift up. And I know that I don't particularly want to put him on the spot, but I think that Chip said something that I know that Mike has heard on the Hill, talking to congresspersons and what have you, in terms of really getting our elected officials to respond to issues. Chip, I wish you would repeat that. I hope you will, and maybe the other persons who have things they want to tell us.
Well, I think I said that in talking about sort of the ongoing violence that this country seems to be engaged in, I was in conversation with the office of the Indiana senator, and we were talking about, at that time, the situation in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I said, you know, we seem to be able to sweep a battlefield, but find it difficult to come to a just conclusion to the conflict. And, you know, there was agreement. And I said, you know, we make a huge investment in weapon systems, and almost pittance in comparison when we invest in exploring ways of resolving violent conflict. And there was agreement. So I asked, you know, why is that? Why don't we invest more? And was told, because there's no constituency for it. There's no constituency for it. We can find a constituency when we sort of raise people's fears and they're willing to invest, you know, huge amounts of our national treasure in weapon systems. But, you know, it doesn't do us any good if we can't come to a just resolution. So from that point on, I've decided that I'm going to do what I can to create in the church a constituency for justice and peace. And I think that that's what we're doing here.
Yes, indeed. I could mention several reasons why that struck me, but other persons might have comments they want to make, either responding to what Chip said or other comments that came from your small groups.
If I could just add, one of the other things that Chip said that stood out to me that I think is kind of, you know, not that we're all looking for a bumper sticker, but like a phrase that really kind of zeroes in on what it is. He said, just peace is a paradigm of engagement. And I think that's what we're really looking at. Certainly we're looking at Friedens, how do we engage our congregants to go outward and engage a wider audience. But I think that's so important is building that consistency and realizing that it has to be about engagement. How do we engage people, and how do we get people wrapped around those messages about what we are doing as a congregation if we can. So thank you, Chip, for that.
Yes. Other comments from your small groups?
We had Central in Atlanta in our group. And Joyce, would you like to share a little bit about what you guys are doing? It was very powerful.
You're on mute,
Not
guys.
sure which part you mean, Sheila.
All of it, but in particular, some of the things that you're doing to reconvene your Sunday school class is a very interesting story.
Well, we have a Sunday school class that's called Practical Theology. So you can guess who the rabble rousers in the congregation are and where we are. But part of that group 10 years ago started, we already were O&A, that took a couple of years. And we from that group wanted to work on the just peace. And we didn't get a lot of encouragement from the senior pastor, not because of the issues, because we already do much of that, but just the title and the word and all that. And eventually he agreed to let us bring a proposal resolution to be a just peace seeking congregation. He wouldn't accept just peace, period. It had to be just peace seeking. And he didn't have that much ownership in dealing with that process, so that the letterhead and the website mostly still continued to identify us as O&A. Occasionally it would mention peace and justice seeking, but it was not really owned. There was never an official committee. There was never, even though there was that vote. So one of our class members, one of the older ones, a lot of us are in our 80s and 90s, urged us to revisit it, and we have been. And we've studied all the white privilege and all the creation and all the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the council and Mission in Action care about it with us. And now the pastor through the council has called for volunteers for a committee. We realize that none of us, except for one probably, can be on that committee because we are so labeled as those who are out in the street corner already. And a lot of folks, even though they care about issues and do good things, are not necessarily street corner people. So that's where we are. That's partly why I asked about the time frame and so on. And Sheila helped a lot in the small group by reminding us, Bill and me from the church who were in the group, that we need to lift up in worship all the things we're doing already, and how this can be a lens, as Adam or our other friend said, for seeing all that and helping us to continually push at the edges of where anybody is with a concern. Is that enough, Sheila? Too much.
That was awesome. I thought everybody needed to hear that. Thank you so much for your efforts.
Thank you.
We're going to
Thank you.
be praying.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Well, if there are other comments, I'd like to hear them, but otherwise, Campbell, before I go to that next phase of introducing our leaders who are movers and shakers for what we do, is there something you want to say? Campbell.
Simply to keep cheering you along, and thanks to people for sticking with us tonight. And we're wrapping up, but we're wrapping up with a big finish that Kwame's going to tell us about.
Thank you. And let me just say that I have really appreciated this gathering and the input from everyone here, but certainly want to thank Friedens. And we are about local churches leading the way. And I know I'm going to take this back to my local church, which is a Just Peace congregation, but we're being reminded of it now. And so good information, good sharing from tonight. So thank you, each and every one. But now I want to, the big bang that we're going to close with is those persons who help make things really happen. There are a lot of people that we want to thank, but in our national office, particularly Washington office, Reverend Michael Newroth, just so thankful for him. Want to hear from him, but also I want to certainly introduce the chair of our steering committee, Pastor Sheila. That's the Reverend Dr. Sheila Harvey Gilliam, pastor of Union Congregation of the United Church of Christ in West Palm Beach, Florida. So I want to turn to the two of you for next steps and sending us forth.
Right. Well, I'll go first, Sheila, if that's okay. And thank you, Kwame. So I wanted to say, and I see Catherine's note there in the chat, maybe I'll address that as well as I share some resources. But I wanted to first also thank our moderators tonight, Campbell and Kwame, as well as the folks from Friedens. It was really great to hear your work and encouragement for all of us, certainly, but also those of us that have been encouraging churches to take up this designation, to see such a robust process is just really encouraging. First in the chat, and I'll be putting these links also in an email follow-up. We are recording this webinar, and I'll email it out to everyone who, to the UCC Just Peace list, which is likely how most of you got word of this webinar tonight. Here's some of the links that we've shared already. So this is, hopefully, there you go. This is our website. We've been working on the website. There's still some broken links and some things that need to get fixed, but we do have a newer Just Peace website. We also had, Adam mentioned the use of the Just Peace handbook, which is a few years old, but it still has a lot of really good information in it, including some steps on how to take on a process of declaring yourself a Just Peace church. As well as he mentioned the robust Facebook group. We do have a private UCC Just Peace Facebook group where lots of folks share information and resources. So that's just some general resources. Next, I wanted to share some specific information on gun violence prevention. So let me copy and paste that here into the chat. And I'll go through a few of these. First and foremost, we in the Washington office have a gun violence toolkit that we've put together that has a variety of resources in it. My colleague, Sandy Sorensen, who's the director of the office, is our lead staff person on issues of gun violence prevention. And she sits at a table called Faiths United to End Gun Violence. So she's been active in that. Actually, Chip participated in a webinar a few weeks ago that was organized by that coalition. I'll see if I can remember to add that. I have the links to that webinar too, so I'll add that. I didn't think of it in time to add to this list, but I'll add that in the email for that webinar. So that's a toolkit. In that toolkit is also an action alert for how to take action now on issues of gun violence. This particular action, you'll see it there. It's P2A, is phone to action. That is a call for Congress to pass background checks. There's certainly lots of other efforts and actions that we could be taking, but this is maybe the lowest hanging fruit that we hope we can encourage Congress to take.
And Mike, the gun violence toolkit is not coming through on the chat.
Okay, I'll see if I can paste it in there separately here at the end. Next is see if I can, oops. Next is the webinar that we did just a few weeks ago, titled Don't Shoot MLK and Gun Violence Then and Now. So that is a link to that webinar saved on YouTube. Next is just a new recent UCC news article about one of the churches in Buffalo that's responding to gun violence, the shooting that happened there in Buffalo. And finally, I put an article by a young Jewish woman whose cousin was a victim of gun violence that was shared by one of our partner organizations here called the RAC, the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism. And I was really struck by this final quote, which I thought I'd leave for this section, which is, she said in the article, it's not the first time we promise to take action, the first time politicians send thoughts and prayers, or even the first time we say enough. But maybe it will be the last time we sit back and say someone else will do the work. I feel like that captures a lot of how I feel these days in response to what's been happening. Next, in terms of responses to Ukraine, there's a lot more that I could share, but here's a few links there as well. This is an action alert that we sent out from our office probably about a month ago on Ukraine, but essentially it's calling for on our government to seek diplomatic resolution as well as to support refugees. I put in there the link to the UCC leadership prayer. This is at the start of the conflict. And you'll see in there a lot of language woven in about our identity as a Just Peace Church in that letter. And then next is the emergency appeal that our disaster ministries Global Hope Office has put out. And Leslie Remley, who's our Minister for Disaster Response and Recovery, was actually on this webinar for a little bit. And I told her that I was going to share and she had to leave, but please do check out that link for the emergency appeal for how to support Ukrainians. Finally, two other kind of announcements of events coming up. One is coming up, one is just passed. The Poor People's Campaign is, well, this coming weekend, June 11th is the March for Our Lives. There's marches happening in many of your cities. If you're not aware of what the plans are, just Google March for Our Lives and put in your zip code to see what's happening. Here in DC, it's also Pride Weekend. So in the spirit of intersectionality, we're trying as a family to support both marches. But the following weekend is the Poor People's Campaign on the 18th. And so there's likely Poor People's Campaign efforts happening in your local communities. But if any of you are planning to come to DC, I'd love to know that. Please put that in the chat. And there are some UCC specific plans being made. There's a gathering at First Congregational downtown. There's also a community-wide dinner the night before. So if any of you are planning to come to DC for the Poor People's Campaign, please let me know, and I'm be happy to share more information with you. And then finally, I put in there EAD 2022 recordings. That may not make sense to all of you, but EAD stands for Ecumenical Advocacy Days, which is a big conference that we here in the DC office help organize. And if you go to that link, advocacydays.org, although the conference happened a few weeks ago, you can still register actually and view the recorded sessions. And we had a great conference. Otis Moss III was one of our preachers. We had denominational time. We had over 50 workshops on a whole range of issues, including gun violence, including Ukraine. I organized the peace and security workshops for that conference. And so that's certainly a resource I would encourage you to take advantage of. So that's maybe enough from me. I'll see if I can get the updated link to that toolkit and put it in the chat. But in the meantime, Sheila.
Yes, hello and good evening, everyone. And I just like to say once again, welcome to Friedens UCC. We are so delighted to have you part of our Just Peace family. It is truly a delight to get to know you tonight. Also want to share a few other items. We are looking forward to having our Just Peace Sunday on September the 18th. So if it's not on your church calendar, speak with your pastors if you haven't already. If you choose to celebrate Just Peace Sunday on that date, let us know, because we would like to follow up with you to see if you have any pictures and to just see what it was like for you guys. So please let us know. Put your church or your name, the name of your pastor in the chat so that we can have a list of that. We're getting a list of churches and pastors who are celebrating Just Peace Sunday. And the theme is breaking through disruptive power of just peace. Breaking through the disruptive power of just peace. So we're excited about this theme. Also, we invite you to share what you're doing, whatever updates you have on our Facebook page. We like to share with one another resources, get ideas. We also invite you to join a committee of our Just Peace Network. The committee that's hosting us tonight is our membership and engagement. And so they have done a wonderful job. And I heard the word engagement come up more than one time tonight. So that is very important. And we're delighted again to have another Just Peace Church that's part of our membership piece. We also have another committee called education and advocacy. So we are excited about the work that we're doing, and we want to invite you to be a part of it. All are welcome. Also, we want to share a new resource. It is a book that I just finished publishing titled Messages of Hope, Preaching Peace and Justice for All. So you all are welcome to see if that is something that will bring some hope for you and your congregations. And last but not least, I would like for us to ponder this phrase that was brought to my attention in the past week. And it was saying that we all need to put feet to our prayers. And so I encourage us to do that, put feet to our prayers. And I think that's why we're here tonight. So thank you so much for coming. Use that phrase in your congregations, pass it along. Let us put feet to our prayers. And as Mike talked about, a couple of marches coming up in whatever ways that we want to put our faith into action. So thank you so very much for being here. On behalf of the Just Peace Network Steering Committee, we thank you, thank you, thank you. I see Denise on the line, Chip. They're also a part of the executive team and so many others. Campbell, who's here, Kwame, Mike. We're just so very blessed with such great leadership. So once again, we invite you to be with us, join with us, and thank you so much for being here. And let us put feet to our prayers. God bless you all. Have a good night.
Blessings all.
Peace. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.